Let's start with -5 minus +3 equals. How can we solve this problem? We need to use the rule of sign for subtracting. Rule of sign for subtracting. Subtracting or subtraction. There. And there are two simple steps. Step 1, you want to change the operation from subtracting to adding. Subtracting to adding. There. Second step is to flip the sign of the second integer. Oops, that's not how you spell integer. There. And then we need to look at this problem, -5 minus 3. And -5 will be your first integer. +3 will be your second integer. And then this minus will be your operation. And so the two steps are asking us to first change the operation from subtracting to adding. So I'll write it here. I'll write -5. We went from minus to adding. And then flip the sign of the second integer. So we need to flip the sign positive to negative and then write 3. And then this is the new problem to solve for the original problem, -5 minus 3. And then we add the rules for adding same signs. Look at that, -5 plus -3. So the rule of sign for addition is anytime you are adding two numbers and they both have the same sign, you add them both and keep the same sign. So 5 plus 3 is 8, and we keep the same sign. So the answer is -8. Easy. Next thing, let's practice. We can start with 10 minus 3. Write that a little better. Minus 3. Go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then press play to check your answer. 10 minus 3. All right, let's solve this problem together. So we have 10 minus 3. Let's change it to 10 plus -3. That is the rule of sign for subtraction. We change the operation from negative or minus to adding, and then we flip the second integer, which is 3, and flip it to -3. And so the rules for opposite signs, when you're adding two numbers with opposite signs, you need to find the absolute value for both integers. So they want you to write the absolute value for 10 or solve the absolute value for 10 and -3. What is an absolute value? The absolute value will look something like this. You have 10 inside these two vertical lines. This symbolizes absolute value, and this number inside of it, or inside the two vertical lines, tell us the number. It is just a number. It is just a number. Let me write that better. It's just a number. And same thing for finding the absolute value for -3. -3, it is just a number. It is not the absolute value. Now, the absolute value, let me go ahead and erase all that. There. The absolute value. So the absolute value refers to the distance from 0. So you have a number line like this. Yeah, you have 0, 5, 10, 15, and so on. That's your number line. So the absolute value refers to the distance from 0, regardless if it's positive or negative. So this 10, it is just a number. These vertical lines want us to find the absolute value of 10. So the absolute value of 10 is the distance away from 0. So from 0, oh wow, I cannot connect it to the 10. So from 0, there we go. You are 10 units or spaces away from 0. So the answer for this number, this absolute value of this number 10, is 10 units, or 10, or positive 10. And then for the -3, you are, I don't think that's 3. 3 will be somewhere in the middle, like here. There. Number 3 is 3 units away from 0, or 3 units away. So the absolute value of this -3 will be 3, or 3 units. But normally you write the positive number 3. Okay. Erase all this. So now that we understand the absolute value, or what is an absolute value, mentally, we just know that the absolute value of this number, 10, the absolute value will be 10, and then the absolute value of -3 is 3. And then we subtract from large to small. So you subtract the large minus small absolute values. So 10 is bigger than 3. So 10 minus 3. So 10 take away 3. You have 7. So 10 take away 3. You have 7. And then the last step of this additional rule for the rule of sign for opposite signs, you want to take the sign from the original number that gave you the large absolute value. So 10 or positive 10, that is the number that gave you the larger absolute value, which is 10. So we go ahead and take this positive, give it to the 7, and your answer is positive 7. Easy. All right, let's try another problem for practice. Let's say negative 10 minus negative 10 equals. So go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then press play to check your answer. Okay, we need to flip this or change this subtracting problem to an additional problem. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down the negative 10. This will be a positive. Negative 10 becomes a positive 10. And I am adding two numbers with opposite signs. And so we need to find the absolute value of both numbers. Mentally, I know the absolute value of negative 10 is 10. And the absolute value of positive 10 is 10. And then we subtract from large absolute value minus the small absolute value. So 10 and 10 are the same, so we can't say 10 is bigger than 10. They're both the same. So we're just going to subtract them, and that gives you 0. So you don't need to apply the last rule, or the last step, which is take the sign from the original number that gave you the larger absolute value. You can't do it here because 10 and 10 are the same. So you just subtract and it gives you 0. All right, let's try another problem. Let's say 5, positive 5, minus 10. Go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then press play to check the answer. Okay. We need to convert or change this problem to a additional problem to solve this problem. So 5 minus 10. So let's go ahead and write down 5 plus negative 10 because we changed the operation from subtracting to adding. And then we flip the second integer from positive 10 to negative 10. And now we are adding or using the rule of sign for adding two numbers with opposite signs. And that states that we need to subtract. So let's go ahead and subtract from large. Oops. We can't subtract until we say absolute value. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. And the absolute value of negative 10, the number negative 10, oops, not a comma, vertical line, is 10. Let me write that a little bit better. Is 10. So we subtract large minus small absolute values. So the large absolute value is 10. 10 is bigger than 5. So we go ahead and write 10 minus 5. So 10, take away 5 is 5. And then you take the sign of the original number that gave you the larger absolute value, which is negative 10. So this negative sign, let me write this a little bit bigger. Negative 10 gave you the absolute value 10, and 10 is bigger than 5, so that's why I circled it as the larger absolute value. And so now we're going to take the sign from the original number that gave us the larger absolute value, which is this negative, and then give it to the 5. So the answer is negative 5. Easy. Okay, one more problem for practice. Let's say negative 25 minus positive 35. Go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then press play to check your answer. Okay, so the first thing I do is just bring down the first integer down because we're subtracting two numbers, and I want to turn it into an additional problem. And then I change the operation from minus to adding. And then we need to flip the positive 35 to negative 35. And then we work from here. So we need to add, well, we need to use the rule of sign for adding same signs. So we have negative 25 plus negative 35. And the rule states that if you're adding two numbers with the same sign, you add them both and keep the same sign. So 25 plus 35 gives you 60, and then we keep the same sign. So the answer is negative 60. And there you go.